Hi everyone, I'm RIZZLE. This is my first tutorial for Sample Genie, and what I'm going to be doing today is running through a track called Duality, which is coming on my forthcoming Dispatch Recordings album, hopefully later on in the year. What I'll be doing is giving you a general sort of track breakdown, where the idea came from, and then I'll be breaking down a couple of the sounds and also going into recreate some of the sounds as well. So yeah, I'm not going to hold things up too much. We'll get right into it. I'll give you a run through of the track first. So it goes a little like this. So yeah, that was the track. What I'm going to do now is load up the project and we'll get straight into it. It's not a massive project by any means. It's about 50 tracks in 49 tracks in total. I've done a bit of tidying up since I actually made the tune, just splitting it off into these groups, just pads, Atmos, that sort of thing, bass is all in one, extra sort of percussion bits, and then main sort of drum bus, just to make it easier for doing this tune. But I will say that the this drum bus was pretty much as it is when I made the tune. There's a lot of processing that goes on the actual drum bus as well, which beefs it up a bit. So I'll be running through all that tasty stuff. I'll just give the drums a little bit of a run through by themselves so you can hear what's going on. Here we go. So yeah, it basically, that is the sort of main groove that runs the whole way through the track. There's a few little edits that come in here and there, some new rides every other 16 bars. The main sort of ride loop changes out sort of halfway through the main drop. Yeah, I will, yeah, I'll just run through the sounds individually. So we've got fairly sort of standard kick, which I believe is just one that's out of my kick sample library that I use. Not an awful lot of processing on that, just some little bit of EQ and a saturator, which is not really doing much, just giving it a little bit of more oomph. It's actually not doing anything, just on medium curve here, which is just coloring the sound slightly. EQ, it's here, so we've just got a side cut, so you're not getting any stereo low end information. Rolled off the tops a little bit, you can see here. Brought out sort of between about 3K just to bring up the click a little bit more. You hear what that's like without the EQ now. You can hear there's some sort of airy bits in the stereo there, which is why this side cut is there. Yeah, and just a boost to the sort of main mid part that you want down the bottom end as well. So that's about 70 odd hertz, yeah. I mean, not the tidiest sort of kick, but I mean, it suits the tune. So yeah, that's that really. There's not an awful lot more to say on the kick. I think it was probably just made out of putting some sort of samples together. That's usually sort of the way I work in making kicks. I don't tend to synthesize an awful lot of stuff. Although I have done recently more transient based sort of stuff. I find it's quite useful to try and synthesize transients out of kicks, because that's sort of like the main sort of fundamental. So yeah, move on to snare. So you can hear that there's actually, you can see here, there's actually two parts of the snare that's going on. One is the main sort of snare hit, which I've recorded out, and the other, I don't know why I've done it this way, but is just the snare going through 100% wet reverb, which is actually just a sort of room reverb. It's going through FabFilter Pro R, which is here, which is just literally just a room snare preset that I've chucked on. It might have been edited a little bit from what it was, but yeah, that's basically just doing the sort of roomy side information stuff. Back solo here. And then you've got the main hit here, which is much more in the middle. And that's doing the bulk of the work, really. It's quite sort of like woody sort of hit, I would say. It's also got that pitchy sort of effect to it as well, which I like. Again, this probably would have been made just by chucking some samples together. Yeah, processing wise, on the main snare hit itself, I think what I did was, it was originally in here and I've just muted it, the dry channel here. Where I've done this reverb, it was on a parallel, so you can see the two chains here. What I've done is just recorded that separately. I don't know why I would have done that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but There was obviously a reason for it at the time, and yeah, I suppose it was just to get more sort of control out of the sound. There's not a mad amount of processing. There's this reverb here on the room. This is on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is on the room. The sort of reverby bits. So yeah, it's just this reverb chain. We've got a frequency pitch shifter, well, frequency shifter even, that towards the end of the sort of phrases around here. Oh, sorry, around here. And here it's sort of pitching up. That's some frequency modulation here. So yeah, that's just gives it this sort of rising pitch sort of effect, which sort of, I guess, sort of makes a kind of riser out of the snare towards the end of the 16. Add some interest. That's actually, the frequency shifter is only on the room part of the snare, so the fully wet reverb, which is interesting. I would have thought that I probably would have done it on both, but apparently not. So that is pretty much all there is on that. There's a compressor which is actually side chained to the snare hit here. So it's actually just ducking the start of this when the reverb tail comes in, basically. So I'll play it with, that's with it on. It's with it out. It's not actually doing too much, really. Not that I can hear. But yeah, I suppose that was just clearing some way for the transient of the main snare to come through. And then main snare wise, it's just, we've got here, we've got a Brainworks, which is monoing up to around 900 hertz. That is about all I can see that it's doing, really. Yeah, it's just monoing the sort of low end of it. And I can see at the end of the chain here, we've actually got it going on a utility, which is actually putting it on full mono. So this is only the mid information that's playing here. You can hear there if I unsolo it, there's quite a lot of sides. So yeah, that's probably why I tended to split the sounds off, and we've got the room in one and the mids on the other. So yeah, kick and snare together, sounds something like this. So yeah, onto the tops. Not a crazy amount of stuff going on here. There is, on the actual bus itself, we've got a sidechain from the kick. We've also got a camel fat here, which is doing a little bit of saturation, really. That's all. Let me solo this and run through. So that's with the camel fat on. Yeah, so it's actually doing quite a bit, that camel fat. It's just a little bit on the mech, a little bit on the tube, and a little bit on the exciter. So yeah, if you love camel fat, it's a classic plugin for fattening up your sounds, really. It's also run through a little bit of a reverb as well, which is running parallel. This, I suppose, is a type of like a room reverb, which is just running on the tops. It's another preset on FabFilter R, which is the drum room tight and fat, amply named. It's also just got a an EQ, which is rolling off the tops and rolling off the bottoms. And then this is set to the utility, which is set to only side information. So there's nothing going on in the middle. That's left all up to the dry sort of hits that are coming through the bus originally, which is playing through this, if I solo it. And then with the reverb, it's just adding a bit of space, really, putting your drums in a nice room, which I find is good to do a lot of the time. It makes them sound a bit more natural, and it's something that I do on quite a lot of my drum buses, and usually on the tops bus only, because I try and keep the kick and snare sort of as free, where the snare's already got quite a lot of reverb on it as well. The kick, you obviously, well, I wouldn't usually put a reverb on a kick, so yeah, I tend to just leave that up to the tops bus, and this is literally all of the tops that are running through that that bus there. So individually, the thing that's doing the main bit of the work is this ride loop. That's the hat. This ride loop here, which I think, I'm not sure if it's one I made or not, or if it's a loop that I found, but yeah, it just really worked in the track. And with the side chain from the kick, it just adds that sort of little bit of a groove as well. This itself is going through a little bit of processing. We've got camel fat on here, which is doing, again, a little bit of work. Just mute all this stuff for the time being. So we've got, this is dry. We've got camel fat, which is beefing it up a little bit. We've got a wider, which is a great plugin actually, which is free from Polyverse. And that's sort of really good for just widening your sounds, and it also will just, where a lot of stereo imagers will sort of widen your sounds, but they also won't check the sort of phase. And I find that when I use this, you encounter a lot less phase issues with your drums, well, especially drums, but anything really. It's quite a useful plugin, and yeah, it's free. Highly recommend that. And then we've got a Valhalla Vintage, which is possibly one of my favorite reverbs going. It's really nice and just the control you have with it is really, really great. This is actually on, you'll see here it's on 0%, but there is actually some volume automation, dry, wet automation on this towards the end of the bar, around the sort of same timings as the frequency pitch shifter on the snare reverb. This basically just automates it in from completely dry signal to a wet signal. You'll hear it here. So it sort of just gets this big reverby sort of mess towards the end of the bar, which sort of just made the drums sort of again sort of making a riser out of the percussions and things that you already have in the tracks, which is, I guess, kind of a key thing that I do in quite a lot, is sort of reusing and trying to make risers out of what is already in the track, as opposed to adding sort of new elements all the time. So yeah, other than that, we've got some shakers and cabasses.